everybody. So this is my interview with Fred Wellman. Fred Wellman is a former public affairs soldier, retired soldier, currently works in public affairs field, in which we are discussing a piece on the Modern Warfare Institute about that was written by a public affairs officer about why the Pentagon is not doing these press briefings with the civilian media and why they in ways don't deserve it and everything. So Fred got really mad about it online as a public affairs person. I got really mad about it online as a public affairs person. So this is an interview with Fred of two people getting really mad online about go figure, a dumb major. Fred, I brought you on to talk about some public affairs stuff from the Modern War Institute. Now, before we get into that, though, kind of give me a little background on yourself.
Sure. Retired Army officer. I spent 22 years in uniform. The majority of my career was spent as an aviator. I was actually a scout helicopter pilot and then Black Hawk guy. During OIF-1, I did civil affairs up near KR West, old Q West, which led me to some TV interviews for the 101st Airborne, which led General Petraeus to say, hey, you should be a public affairs officer. So I switched to PAO very late in my career. I was actually a lieutenant colonel by the time I became a public affairs officer. I spent the latter part of my career, I worked for General Petraeus in Iraq and at Minsticky, General Dempsey. Went to grad school, came back out to Iraq again for General Dubik and General Helmick, and I retired out of the Pentagon back in 2010, and then started my own public relations firm here based in Virginia that focuses exclusively on veterans and military families and the issues that surround their lives.
Cool. And for those of you who might be new to the podcast itself, I've been in public affairs myself since the very beginning of my career as a little E-Fuzzy. I was a PAO. Back in 2001 when I went to AIT. So, and I've done it in Iraq, Afghanistan, and half a dozen countries in between. My most recent jaunt was out to Japan about 2 years ago, covering the Yamoussoukro military. That basically the American military integrates with the Japanese military and does war gaming and things like that. So I helped cover down with that and got to hang out with Japanese PAO and get really, really drunk with them. That was a lot of fun.
Cool stuff, man. That's one of the bennies.
Yeah, public affairs is a lot of fun because every week you get to do something a little bit different. So, So the reason why we're here, though, is to talk about another one of our illustrious members, Captain Chase Spears, who wrote something.
He's a major now, as a matter of fact.
Is he a major? Yeah, I have no doubt about that. And I gotta say, like any other MOS in the military, I have run into some real kind of idiot public affairs officers. I actually had it's funny. I had a not really a flashback, but one time my wife and I were at a hotel. We were hanging out. We were drinking, and one of those military, join the army and be all that you can be and whatnot came on, or whatever the thing is that we're doing now, whatever our fucking logo is. And there was an officer that I had to deal with while I was in Iraq was the main focus of this, and I was already really drunk on rum, and I just started yelling at the top of my lungs about how that guy could go fuck himself. And that's PAO sometimes.
It's very true.
You might maybe offline we'll talk about that. You might know who I'm talking about. You may have met him before, but we're talking about Major or Captain Promotable, whichever one it is. Chase Spears, who wrote something for the Modern War Institute called "Takes Two to Tango: The Relationship's Role in a Healthy Military Media Relationship," which on first glance for that sound okay. I went into this with open ears, and immediately had those ears boxed by Chase Spears because he is the language that he uses in this is MAGA at best, but it's really just an unhealthy. So if you're not aware, the military or the Pentagon hasn't really done a press briefing with a formal press briefing, right? In nearly a year.
Right, closing on a year. Next month will be.
Now, this isn't to say that they're not they're not getting information out. Obviously, there's press releases, there's there's cattle calls and whatnot, but they're not doing formal military briefings, which is very strange. But I mean, we live in a strange new world now under the Trump administration. So rather than saying, "Hey, as public affairs people, we need to have this kind of open transparency," which as a public affairs person, I fully believe. I'm all about get in the front of everything, whether it's good or bad. Get up in the front, and you need to be talking about it. because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to inform the public. So so not doing this is obviously it's not great. It's not a good look, as we like to say. So Chase kind of goes through and does a lot of blaming. And Fred, I saw you getting real mad about this online, and that's why I
I
wanted
did.
to. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it. So
Making
please,
lots of friends.
you know, let's talk about it. What about what Chase is talking about? We'll link this in the show notes, but tell me what it is that you don't like about what Chase is talking about here.
Well, my frustration is, I was brought into public affairs late in my career. I was very honored that John Petraeus brought me in because, I'm a big believer in what I used to call offensive public affairs, right? My frustration always with a lot of what we do as public affairs officials and leaders in the military in general is what I call defensive public affairs, right? Where we respond to query. We wait till somebody calls, right? we don't tell our story. We wait till somebody is mad at us to address an issue, right? Whereas I was always very big on we aggressively seek out telling our story, good and bad, because sitting on a bad story doesn't make it better. It just it becomes scandalous once it comes out. So there's been great frustration building in a lot of us who are those kind of passionate public affairs officials who stick to the DoD principles of information, which is like our Bible on maximum information, minimum delay. We have a duty to the American people to inform them. It literally is written in law and in policy that we inform the American people of the activities of their military. And so, under, of course, on this administration and others, it's become very tighter and tighter with that information. What happened was here comes. So someone wrote an article about how Adjutant Stavridis, great communicators, like, hey, this is their duty. The Pentagon was always known as the place that speaks, that daily briefings on what's going on. And we're deployed across the world. We are spending billions of dollars. We owe it to the American people to tell how we're doing it. So Major Spears, who's at the Command General Staff College right now, took it upon himself to write a scholarly article, but it ended up being what set me off was a couple of things. One, the general premise was that the media itself is partially blamed for this lack of communication because they've become politicized, right? And then he goes on to cite examples which are just beyond belief, which was the Stormy Daniels coverage and Covington Catholic, which was these are of course are huge issues in the right wing politics area of especially Mr. Trump. This is all about the evil liberal media. And of course, have nothing to do with defense. I've gone to war with military reporters. I've embedded in combat with them. I've had Barbara Starr who forgot about it. I tell a story about Barbara Starr on CNN, who when we had a full bird colonel commit suicide in my unit in Iraq under General Petraeus, we could not confirm that the family knew it was a suicide. And this being just 2 years after what happened with the friendly fire killing of Pat Tillman. I want to be very careful of making sure families knew the truth and them not finding out in the news, right? And the PAO at the home station where the family was living could not confirm deny to me that they had been told that it was a suicide. And they were kind of it's under investigation. But unfortunately, the gentleman was found in his hooch with a locked door with his service pistol, right? He killed himself. There's the reasoning of how and what led to it was the investigation, but there's no doubt in anyone's mind that he killed himself. And so Barbara and I were on the phone from Baghdad, carefully constructing her script because Barbara was scared to death that the family would find out about this from her inadvertently, right? And so we spent 15 minutes carefully writing her script for the announcement because at the time, the highest ranking death in Iraq, a full bird colonel. And then Barbara didn't want me to watch it because she was nervous, did the piece, called me back and cried. And so here I'm on the phone with the Pentagon journalist who's covering the death of one of our soldiers in combat, and she's in tears about it. And I use that story a lot because it shows how passionate the military beat reporters are for the most part, how they take their mission seriously as we do. So to smear them with a political article, then publish it on the Military Writers Institute of the West Point, which I'm a graduate of, I honestly just set me off. And I've been getting abused on Twitter because I was so angry, I wasn't scholarly in my approach, but it set me off both as a public affairs official because we have a duty that we don't get to pick the reporters. We don't get to pick their politics. We don't get to pick who we talk to. We have information and we distribute that information without any political spin. That's how it is. That's the law. Two, that a very baldly political article was published on a West Point official publication really set my hair on fire. you
Yeah.
know,
He
and
mentioned, yeah, he brings up the Covington Catholic
right,
school story. He brings
Stormy
up,
Daniels,
Stormy Daniels, but of course he doesn't, he wants to bring up these things that are, in some ways rightfully maybe negative towards the press, but he doesn't
whatever.
want to bring up all the things that are maybe massively negative towards the administration that the press has
Right,
been trying to cover. And also
right.
this idea that like the press is some like blob that is all the same, because he goes in, he also talks about how he's stationed out at Fort Riley, Kansas, and he's like, we're doing this, that, and the other thing, and we can't get the journalists to show up. Well, fucking, of course you can't, man. Do you know where Fort Riley is? You're there. You know
Right.
you're in the middle of nowhere. Like
Oh,
now for me in my career, I've always been the one that wrote the stories. I'm the one who went out and got the photos. I'm the
right.
one who helped edit the stuff. I'm the one who did layout and design, and then I marketed my stuff. And sometimes it gets picked up, sometimes it doesn't. Like you could be a lazy PAO and just do it and slap it up on
Yeah,
divots.
but as a public affairs officer, your job is to understand what is newsworthy, what's not. We're actually taught that in public, in DINFOS. But the rules of newsworthy. If it bleeds, it leads, right? Those everybody knows them unofficially, but there's 9 of them, right? I won't go into them now because I forget them. But is an exercise that he mentioned an exercise in the Arctic with 150 soldiers. First of all, 150 soldiers is not very many when we're deployed around the world in combat. Second of all, it was covered in previous versions. So why should a reporter cover the same exercise, for the 10th time? It's not news anymore. The American people know we're doing stuff there. And then the idea of covering, I think you complained that a new degree program for NCOs wasn't being covered. Like, how is that national? Why does Joe Smith in Poughkeepsie care that a sergeant major can get a college degree now? Why does that matter to his life? And the idea of somehow smearing the press because this young public affairs officer doesn't understand what is newsworthy and how to get his stories told effectively is really more of an indictment of him than the press, right? I mean, I know I've built my company and my career on nurturing. When I was in Baghdad, we were in the green zone. So I had a deal where I was fortunate to have my own Bronco, and I drive over to the media operations center where anybody who's embedding in Iraq had to stop and get their any journalists coming through had to stop and get their credentials and then wait for their pickup from their unit. So I made a habit of daily swinging by. I'd call over, say, hey, who's there? So I got to know Tom Ricks the first time. Tom was over there writing a book. I took him out for Burger King, right? It was like
The army date going to Burger King.
right, exactly, especially in the green zone, because a lot of the reporters, especially who were stationed in Iraq, were out at the Palestine Hotel or other places, or the New York Times at their own house, and they ate a lot of the same food over and over, right? So believe me, picking up a journalist and taking him over to Burger King was a pretty good way to bond with a journalist who'd been eating chicken and rice for 6 months, and so we did that, and so I said, what are you covering? What are you here for? I remember distinctly a very specific journalist was in town to cover the training of the Iraqi security forces. And that was my job. And I said, what are you looking for? He goes, well, I'm going to go out and embed with units that are partnered with Iraqis. So it was really more the core side of things rather than my training side. So it was actually the units were operating, which was not mint sticky, but it's okay. And I literally went through, he told me as itinerary, and I went through and told him what to expect in each unit, because some American units did a better job of work with Iraqis than others. Some, it was not a good relationship. Some, it was a great relationship. And I said, here's what you should expect. And he was shocked. I said, here's what you're going to see. And he got such a better story. It came out much more nuanced because he went into these units expecting to be an issue and understood, maybe it wasn't the Iraqis. Maybe this American commander had much more of a cavalier attitude about his relationship with his Iraqi partners, whereas this one was like all about treating them like they were his own soldiers. And so I've made a career of knowing what a journalist is looking for as far as what their stories are, knowing their beat, and then fitting whatever my story I had to tell for the United States Army or my clients now after 8 years in this business into that beat in ways they could do it. But we have a client that covers homelessness, National Coach for Homeless Veterans. They never had media come to their conference each year. 250 homeless advocates right here in D.C. Well, what was happening was they were trying to pitch a 3-day conference to reporters. No reporter can spend 3 days at a conference. What we do instead at ScoutComs is we break down the agenda. So say it's a women homeless veterans panel at 2:00 on day 2. Well, I know that journalist X just did a whole story about the challenges that women veterans are having. So I'll call that reporter up and say, hey, look, we had this conference. The two of the leading experts on women veterans homelessness are speaking at 2:00 on day 2. I think this would be a great opportunity for you to learn something, and we'd love you to come over. And you know what? It works. I've got a reasonable ask. It's in their beat. It's newsworthy, right? And
Yeah,
they
I
come
mean
over,
it's
and that's my job. That's my job as a public affairs or a public relations executive, is to understand my story and how it fits in the American narrative. And that was another part. That was my professional frustration with Major Spears is, and is you're basically blaming the media because you don't know how to do your job. in an environment where local media is dying, right? They don't have the money. So whoever covers Fort Riley probably has one reporter that covers the military period, at best. And it's probably a young person right out of college. And then two, there just isn't that. There's a lot of national news going on right now, right? I mean,
there's
it's a horrible. Yeah, I mean, it's a horrible
lot going on.
PAO, you're a public relations guy in DC. If you're in DC, let's be honest. You have an event, you plan for months, you're so excited, you're going to have all these famous people speaking, and then let's say an itinerant tweet goes out from 1600 Pennsylvania, and you lose your news cycle. It's just, and you have to go to a client and say, yeah, this happened. It happens. Or you have an interview with somebody set up, and they get. Oh, literally, I had a major national veteran service organization leader, and we were going to sit down and have an interview, and she got summoned to the White House. Literally summoned to the White House. Well, they're not going to turn that down. So she goes running out in the middle of our interview because she can't do it because she's gotta go see the White House. I mean, so that's our business. It's not fun sometimes, but your job as a military officer is to step up to that podium with bad news and with good news and with happy news and tell it. And you don't get a vote in who is sitting there in the audience, unfortunately. And that was my frustration. I just feel like this whole theme of picking, politics, where the fact that he wrote an argument based on the political leanings of a journalist and his own is really what made my hair explode, and why I was so over the top, probably in my anger, about the whole situation, is that a military blog, an official one, published an article with such blatant political overtones, not just undertones. and the funny thing about that, the reaction since, and you've seen it, has been this sort of tisk of outrage about all of us who got mad about it, right? And several pieces have been written since then are like, wagging their finger at the ad hominem attacks and the outrageous anger. The Twitter troll, I was called a Twitter troll by a colonel. I'm like, no, I'm not a Twitter troll. I'm a professional.
Wait till I come find you. You'll find a Twitter troll there, and I'm still PAO.
And I like to point out to these guys, that's cute, but I pay for your salary. And that was my big point with Chase. This is all cute. I love that you guys are in the blogosphere and you think you're tough. But in the end, I'm a retired officer. I'm a civilian. I'm a taxpayer. And by the way, as a business owner, I pay a ton of taxes. And I'm telling you right now, you work for me. And I'm getting very frustrated right now at the tone I'm hearing from serving officers, especially, who forget that they work for us. You know what I mean?
And I think one of the biggest issues that I had with it, especially the politicizing, as you mentioned, is that again it's like Chase tries to form all journalists are military journalists. Like everybody, there's nothing else that you could ever possibly want to cover other than the military, because he's bringing up stuff that anchors what CNN or MSNBC or anybody might have said. But you've got people like you said, Tom Ricks, a guy that I served with in Iraq, who is now a staff writer for Stars and Stripes, J.P. Lawrence.
Yeah, good guy.
Yeah, I follow. And though like sometimes you have to go and you have to find, you have to dig these people out. But yeah, I'm more interested in what JP is writing about, because he's literally in Afghanistan and he is writing about these things that's happening in a war that I've been a part of and that affects me still and that is still going on. I'm way more interested in that than whatever the hell it is that's going on at Fort Riley. No matter what, I'm even going to Fort Riley for training like in 2 months, and it's not like I'm reading up on whatever training's happening out there, because Fort Riley, if you don't, like, Kansas is already in the middle of nowhere. Fort Riley is, you found the exact center of that nowhere and you put a military base there. That's Fort Riley. So there's not a lot going on. And as you said, if lucky, maybe there's one or two beat writers that covers the military there.
Right.
So, it's just, he has a very basic misunderstanding of who journalists are, what they do. And that's why he's like, for me, he's a massive failure as a public affairs officer. And that he would do this because, he wants to probably chasing some kind of clout, to write something like this, to blame other journalists. And then for anybody who is not public affairs to come to us in public affairs and say, you shouldn't say that, you shouldn't do this. I saw somebody say, well, we need to open up the discussion. No, we don't. He's bad at his job. He's whining. He's complaining about something because he doesn't understand the basic fundamentals of public affairs, whether you're enlisted or you're officer. And I'm sorry, I cannot in 240 characters or 280 character tweets explain to a major how to do your literal job. But what I can do is send them a middle finger emoji and tell them to piss off. And you know what makes me feel better later on down the road? Because, because even if I did, say I do this, massive thread, or I go and I write something for the Modern War Institute myself, or I, use my platform as, or do a podcast with somebody else who's mad about it. I can do all these things, but in the end, this is a person who wrote this because they already have some sort of ingrained thing inside of their brain about the relationship between military public affairs and the civilian media. And it's a very toxic thing that he has. And he needs to go back to whatever his original branch is and not be public affairs anymore, because this shows that he's ineffective. And this shows that, and thankfully, if you're going to have an ineffective PAO, I guess stick him out in Fort Riley, Kansas. But
the thing is interesting too is if you look at he had his personal website until I think he's deleted most of it now. It was very political. He wrote an op-ed for the Baltimore Sun about kind of bashing Obama for the trade for Bergdahl. He wrote a really nasty personal post on his website about the Democratic National Convention and the appearance of the Khans, the Gold Star parents. So he's been writing these political things, and that's what kind of made me upset too. Is he's been blatantly political as a serving officer, like over the top, which a lot of is happening, but really over the top political for a while, and has been unscathed by it. No one cares. And then I guess the second piece that's really has caused me to have a low boil ever since is this reaction from other, if you will, academic or intellectual, the military officers, which has caused me more heartburn, because the answer has been, tisk, at least he stepped out there, at least he wrote. Like, no, he wrote crap. It in many ways, and I know again, we're not supposed to go Hitler, right? But it's an overtop comparison. But what it reminded me of, seriously, is it's almost like, in Germany in the 30s, where the smart intellectual Germans just couldn't believe that, Hitler was serious. It's like, sure, he's arguing that the Jews should be murdered, but let's talk about his points. It's like, no, there's no reasonable point. Like you said earlier, there's not an intellectual argument to have over what he said. He compared a coverage of a major national news story, and you may not like it, but the story down the story is major national news. The president of the United States has been accused of paying off a person using campaign funds in an illegal manner. That's news. That would be news in any era, no matter what Mrs. Daniels did for a living. Okay.
Yeah. And you know what? I bet if I go through Tom Ricks's work, he's probably not written about that, because that's not his beat.
His beat, right? And so it just set me off to no end. And then to have the academics come back and tisk us and wag their finger. The one from Kavanaugh talking about the Twitter trolls, like, well, number one, welcome to 2019, because no shit, people write on Twitter. And by the way, this is the thing. That's your fucking operating environment. In the 2019 and 2020 and beyond, we're going to fight battles on Twitter. We're going to fight battles on Instagram. It's not going to be on a fucking blog from West Point. And to have serving officers, lieutenant colonel and colonel above, wag their fingers at the social media world, like they're too good to fucking their dirty little fucking pretty hands on it, and only going to write these thought pieces for fucking journals and for blogs, and think that's an effective tool for communicating doctrine, shows you just how fucking out of touch these guys are. The battle for the 2016 election occurred on fucking Twitter, and you can't just tisk and act like it didn't happen, and it really infuriates me, obviously.
Yeah. I'm going to be looking forward to everybody who says, who comes to me and says, wait, you're a leftist and you have a podcast about being a leftist and are critical of the military and are in the military. It's like, yes, but I'm enlisted, I'm a reservist, and I'm in an ops position in a tiny unit in the middle of St. Louis that nobody cares about. I'm not writing for the Modern War Institute and putting
as official. I mean, that's an official blog.
Yeah.
I mean, that's as official as it gets. The Modern War Institute is an official blog. And then to have what was the one that criticized Herb Carmen today was or he criticized, they were tissing us from the Art of War scholars from the Command General Staff College, another official blog, saying, yes, it's outrageous the way people are attacking this young man. No, it's not. We're attacking his ideas. And boo-hoo, he got attacked. Because again, I thought we were like combat soldiers. I thought aren't we all fucking warriors? Are you really tissing me because mean words were? I mean, I just can't get over the fact all this finger wagging about mean tweets. I mean, what the fuck is this, high school? I mean, honestly, if you can't handle some mean tweets thrown your way, and then you have to respond with this ridiculous man in the arena bullshit, TR quote, that's exactly the point of the man in the arena. The man in the arena has the courage to step into it, and he's going to have barbs thrown at him. And frankly, he may have actually had barbs thrown at him. And here in 2019, poor Major Chase had some mean tweets about him, and you'd think we were actually crucifying him, for God's sake. It's like, again, welcome to 2019.
Yeah,
and battles are being fought on this platform.
You guys should see the fucking replies I get.
Oh my God! Right?
From angry tankies and shit.
Like, oh my God! Libtard, Oathbreaker.
Yeah, that's my favorite one.
Oathbreaker's my favorite. Yeah, libtard, cuck, wimp. I love the ones always like some guy questioned the size of my penis today. It's like, thanks, bro. What is this, fucking high school? I mean, literally not a day goes by.
I get told that I'm going to be thrown out of a helicopter on a regular basis if I can survive. If I can survive some shitty fash Pinochet lovers online, you guys can deal with me sending you a picture of the pig pooping on its own balls.
There you go. And by the way, I use my real name. I have my company listed there. It makes my COO crazy. Brian's a good man. I think I make him nuts, but I've never not used my real name. I've never been one to stand back and say that I'm hiding. And there's good reason to do that. I'm not that guy. So if I can stand here and stand in the breach and fight for the Constitution as I see it, and fight for the right way to do our job as a former military officer and still one who supports that community, then some major can get beat up a little bit about a bad blog and respond. And that's the punch on this whole thing. I know you're probably out of time. The punch on this whole thing is the son of a bitch actually blocked all of us too. So he's such a, I mean, literally. So what is it? I guess you got to update the TR quote. The man in the arena who is going to go hide when he gets yelled at, and he'll only go in the arena if no one's in the arena watching him. And that's because that's what you're literally doing when you block everybody on social media because they said mean things about you. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. So anyone who's trying to paint this guy as some line of truth telling just is so far off base, it makes my head scream. I just want to scream.
And I'll definitely certainly the initial replies to this were firm but respectful.
Right.
And then it, maybe it went downhill, but it started out with like, hey, this is a bad take that you're doing here. And that's, if you're going to put something like this out there and not have the ability to have back and forth, because I do. I have more than once, changed my opinion on something or had somebody, send me a DM because I never want to be that old dude. I'm 36 now. I'm not that old, but I never want to be that person who's gotten to a point where I can't change my mind. So,
yeah.
So, Fred, thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been a lot of fun. And yeah, likewise. I'm glad that I could talk to somebody else about this. So, thank you so much. You can follow. Again. Yeah, you can follow Fred at FP Wellman on Twitter, and we'll put his, like I said, we're going to put the link to this article and the link to Fred's Twitter in there. So thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Enjoy your day.
Hey, everybody. So this is a interview that I did with Amber Mathwig, also known as Tooterbell, Tooterbelle on Twitter. Her recent arrest while trying to stand up for student safety and kind of a story about all the activism and everything that she has done on UNC Chapel Hill. So really great to have her on. Really happy to bring her on to talk about this because obviously there are a lot of problems going on right now, especially with the way that police are treating people on campuses and everything. So this is my interview with Amber, and I hope you enjoy it. Amber, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm actually really good.
You better be. You're getting free money, aren't you, right now, Amber?
I've been telling people I'm living my best UBI life right now. It's much busier than I anticipated a few days ago, but working it out. Just had lunch with our good Twitter pal, Cato of Utica. So
what's going on? Why are you on administrative leave right now, Amber?
Where do I even start? So I work at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and many people may be familiar with this for being a university where a Confederate statue was torn down on August 20th of 2018. So at the night before this current academic year started.
And that was the Silent Sam one, right?
Yeah, Silent Sam. So you can look up UNC Chapel Hill, Silent Sam, probably catch up on a lot of things as far as the background to this. It was a Confederate monument that stood in place for, I believe, 115 plus years. Lots of activism over the years, but definitely since the 60s to try to get it taken down. It stood at the very front of our campus. Like if you were to say this is the gateway to the campus, this was it. To see this Confederate monument. And so there's been increased activism to have it removed, particularly given just how beholden the university still is to white supremacists and or white supremacism and patriarchy and just the ongoing issues of race at our university. I mean, to this day, to this very moment right now. And over this last year, since the start by activists, to make that clear, it was torn down. There has been a lot of police violence against anti-racist activists, both students and community members. There has been increased threats of violence from white supremacists, not the cops, just to clarify, in addition to the cops, that have, they've come to campus, they've terrorized our campus, all sorts of things. Again, backstory is really, really long and extensive. And all this year as a staff member in my job is serving student veterans. I'm the Student Veterans Assistance Coordinator. I have always supported the students and community in, doing this because they're right. We have to change things. And so I've, received a lot of feedback, to put it nicely, on that throughout the year. And I've had a lot of conversations with people, and always kind of felt like, that my job's been at risk this whole year. But I've been kind of able to toe that line of, part of my job is student safety generally. And so advocating whenever I could in the spaces that I'm allowed into. Things have gotten a little more increased lately. On March 16th, several white supremacists, to include the who've actively made threats to people on our campus, walked around our campus open carrying for about an hour. And when the campus police approached them, they just basically shook their hands and told them to leave. As opposed to, it's basically a felony everywhere that you can't carry weapons on a institutional property or an educational property. So that incident really ignited a lot of people, and like, oh wow, like here maybe all year we've been like, oh well, this is bad, but we need to work with cops. Like people are like, oh my God, the cops are bad, right? And so this past 6 weeks has been kind of a lot of responding to that, responding to more increased threats. I think it was about a week or two after that, two of those same individuals came in to face the Unsung Founders Memorial, which is a memorial to the enslaved persons who, basically built our university. This university would not exist without their labor. And so they, all in one night, they vandalized memorial, another art piece on campus that was devoted to activists, stole a flag. They stole our university system flag from the office down the street, raised the Confederate flag in its place, And nobody noticed this until I guess like 2:00 the next afternoon is when it was reported. Like there is a Confederate flag raised over the office, basically the office of the flagship institution. And if anyone's like, this all sounds really just out of control, and yeah, like that's how I feel about it most of the time.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's really not anybody who, like, other than you and other student activists, which and of course people going around and defacing other monuments to the past really kind of throws out that whole we want Silent Sam reinstated because of history, but it does, like, look, we get it, you're white supremacists now, and if like people that can't put two and two together on that, and of course you've got the cops who are in bed with anybody who is going to be drawing that power as well.
Yeah. So, and along with a lot of this stuff this past year, cops have lied on the witness stand. That has led to some people receiving charges or not being able to get their charges dropped. And so, those are things that are being challenged in the court system right now. Video evidence is great. Whenever you are out, video stuff, like, I cannot emphasize that enough. Which is going to be funny because in a minute I'm going to tell you I didn't video what happened to me because I wasn't ready for it. But, so there's been a lot of calls for firing people, demilitarizing our police. That's a whole nother story about how the system actually wants to increase, basically have a system-wide SWAT team to respond to student activism. And so our students held a, interruption the other day, and they held a rally during regular class hours that lasted about 3 hours. No, 3 hours? 2 hours, I think. And one of the reasons that it lasted so long is because the university administration would not send somebody to accept their letter of demands, regarding policing and responding to that all on our campus. And while there has been responses, they've always been very weak, and they've always been in favor of prioritizing that whatever the police say they want to do is the best thing. And I think repeatedly throughout the year that has been shown to not even remotely be the best thing. So this is all kind of a big, vague backstory to what happened to me this last Wednesday, April 24th. So a few hours after this rally was over, I left work a little bit later than I normally do. I'd been walking around all afternoon. There were some other things that had happened. I was just kind of sitting there in the air conditioning, contemplating. And our veteran center is at the end of a dead-end road. It ends in our parking lot. And when you leave, you have to drive past two buildings, one of which is being debated right now on whether it's occupied, but it's used by the community policing and some other people. And then the other one is occupied by business and HR people from my own department. And everything else around us used to be student housing, but those buildings are all fenced off and subjected to be torn down at some point in the future because they don't have any fire sprinkler systems in them. And as I'm leaving the parking lot, I see just like tons of police vehicles, a few fire vehicles from Chapel Hill Fire, a few ambulances from Orange County EMS, and just tons and tons of emergency people out there. And I was like, I was annoyed, like, what is going on right now? What are these fuckers doing? And I drove through, and I saw a few people holding on to paintball masks. And I was like, this is weird. So I drove up, I did a U-turn, I drove back through this crowd of people. Mind you, I'm driving through these people, and I see more paintball masks, and I see training rifles. What appeared to me was, regular rifles that had their barrels probably swapped out, and then they had orange tips. So I've not used those training rifles specifically. So yeah. But I was like, I still didn't understand what was going on for some reason. Like my brain was telling me this isn't good, this isn't right. So I went in, parked back in front of my building. The building was still open. It's open for student use until 7 p.m. So there's some work studies there. Fortunately, it was not a very busy afternoon. Normally, there's maybe anywhere from 8 to 12 people hanging out studying in there. And I walked through the building and I said, guys, I don't know what's going on next door. I'm not very comfortable with it. I want you to stay in here while I go check it out. And, a bunch of military guys, they don't listen to me. So 2 of the students followed me out, and we walked out the back door, which has a sidewalk leading to the next building. And then I walked around the side of that building, and I still don't understand what's going on. And I'm like, I'm just going to sit down on the steps and watch for a few minutes. And during this time frame, I had messaged my boss, and I told her, I don't know what's going on. I'm very uncomfortable with it. And as soon as I sat down on the steps, I heard pop, pop, pop from inside the building. And immediately, that's when everything that had been going through my brain finally processed. I was like, they are holding a simunition round training in a building that is surrounded by other buildings with people in it. And this building, there's nothing put in place as far as a safety perimeter, to ensure that nobody's coming through here while they're doing this. And that was really my primary concern at that time. And of course, the whole backstories around how they just do basically whatever they want with blatant disregard for anybody's safety.
Yeah, and you're the one, you listen to that and you immediately think simulation rounds, but what does anybody else think? We live in a world where people are shooting on campuses and in, synagogues, and there's already tension and everything, and then you're just going to start shooting off round. Go to a fucking range somewhere downtown like regular cops do.
Well, if you want, from the training aspect, because I have done this training, and that's the big thing. I have done this training in my past with military police stuff. I did about 3 years where my department was doing this, and we did it in an abandoned building that had a fence. Nobody's nearby. There's only one access control point. All these safety precautions have to be utilized. And one of the biggest things when it comes to simunition round training is that you're training as if the environment is real. Yes, you're not shooting real bullets, obviously, but, treat every weapon as if it's loaded and treat every weapon as if it's real. And none of these things are being followed. And I really have some other doubts about what other safety precautions are supposed to be followed as well, just based on my observations from during this incident. So I'm sitting on the steps, and my 2 students are standing off to the side like, wow, what is going on? And somebody from the fire department comes up, and he's like, you need to leave. We're in a training environment, and it's not safe for you to be here. I was like, no shit. I was like, I'm not leaving because I've already identified that. And so he's like, well, I'm going to have the training supervisor come out and talk to you. So I hear them stop their training, and I out of the corner of my eye, I see people had exited around the back of the building and had kind of swung the long way back to the parking lot. And several minutes goes by, and it didn't really occur to me why it was taking so long for the training officer to come speak to me. And I guess that's because they immediately called their patrol officers. And so this patrol officer showed up, and basically they were insisting on their right to be there, and that I, needed to leave. I was on the phone with my boss. I was on the phone with the local chief of police because, when they said this training environment was Chapel Hill, I assumed it was also the police, and turned out to just be their fire department, which is a whole nother story, by the way. And people wouldn't dislike firemen so much if they didn't, go hand in hand with cops all the time.
Yeah, wait, I'm sorry. Was the fire department there practicing shooting?
No, I think they were there to. I would hope that they were there to practice responding.
Well, obviously, they didn't do a very good job of it.
Right. I'm like, yeah, there's some huge safety issues. As you can imagine, you know me well enough. I got into a little bit of a back and forth verbal with the cop. I continued to sit on the steps the whole time. I got up for a few minutes when he started harassing the two students, both black men, and that there was definitely some targeted racial harassment against these two men versus another white male student that showed up a few minutes later. He threatened them with honor court. You know, if you don't do these things that I'm telling you, you might go to honor court. And whew, that had me heated, absolutely heated.
I assume that's like the court of you did bad in for school. Like, it's not a real court, but they can kick you out of school for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's like other things. There's punishments that are handed down for going to honor court. But, you know, like he was just using this. It was stupid. It was very stupid. So anyways, I was told that if I didn't leave, I was going to be arrested. And I said I wasn't leaving. So I was told to stand up and turn around. And I said no. So they picked me up and started walking me away. But I say picked up, I mean they arm-barred me and forced me up that way. Probably more than what was necessary, but whatever. They're jerks. And I was arrested. I was searched and placed in a squad car and processed and taken to our county magistrate system, to have these charges pressed against me for second-degree trespassing and resisting a public official, all because I refused to leave an environment in which I felt that they were being very unsafe, particularly given that the building next door was occupied by people, by students, and that this area of campus, has people walking around it all the time because it's kind of like a nice wooded area with lots of sidewalks and trees and everything. So
yeah, I mean it feels like we have.
The story is I was immediately placed on administrative leave. I'm on leave with pay, fortunately, while they investigate. Well, my department, not the police, while my department investigates the incident.
Yeah, it really feels like that there was a couple of options that could have happened that the campus police could have taken, put out signs, say, have somebody outside saying we're doing simulation rounds here, put out some kind of like announcement, right? Like anything that, we do in the military. Like, we don't go anywhere and start shooting off anything, blank rounds, regular rounds, anything without telling somebody and letting everybody around know. So like this is either no. Yeah, I can't. I mean, we put up fences and shit, like for reasons. So either this is like massive stupidity or direct antagonization, and probably it's the antagonization, but it could very well be stupidity as well. But yeah, that is incredible that anybody would, it is incredible that any group of like the police would ever feel like let's just blow off rounds that people might not be able to tell the difference, because like I said, you and I can tell simulations. I know the difference between a blank round and a regular round being shot off, but I'm going to go ahead and say that your average like North Carolina Chapel Hill student in their like early 20s doesn't know the difference. And that is an immediate like, hey, not everybody knows guns as well as us troops do. And it's just it's insane that they would ever like think that to make those assumptions. It's just it's wild to me. And that's why I think like it's not a making an assumption. It's let's fuck with these kids. We're going to do whatever we want to do, and you can't do anything about it, because if you do, we'll just arrest you.
Well, that's what they've been doing all year. They're literally just arresting people for whatever they want, And that's been one of the greatest disappointments to me as a staff member here at the university, that it's very clear that they're targeting people, and they're being allowed to do this. And every time, God forbid, the university actually acknowledges something happened, they're like, and thank you to our police officers for keeping us safe yet again. And it's like, but they hurt people. They harmed people. They're pushing people through like systemic violence by utilizing, judicial punishment to try to stop people from speaking out.
Yeah, and the idea of a SWAT team is just using implied violence to do the exact same thing. Like nobody, and that's always, we've talked about it plenty of times before. Is just that the right and conservatives and people like that, they just default to violence because it's like, well, I can just do this. I have the power to do this thing, rather than like talk to you and treat you as a human being. Because if you don't agree with me, then why should I ever try to understand you? You should just understand me and do what I say, because I have the guns and I will just bring more guns if necessary.
Yeah,
definitely. So what happened
the other night? Well, we have the right to be here and do whatever we want, and we're just going to arrest you on some made up rule. You're not doing what we told you to do.
So you said you've been keeping yourself busy. So what are you working on? Since all of this happened. And what are you planning to work on, I guess, as well?
Yeah. Well, I have a wonderful community here in Chapel Hill. I had almost a dozen people show up for jail support the other night, to include bringing their kids, which was adorable. I loved watching the kids run around while I'm like sitting there in handcuffs. So talking to people, there's still other things that are coming up at the end of the school year. Our whole Silent Sam statue thing is not even resolved. I'm very well connected with a lot of people in veteran communities, so there's ongoing projects that I've had with them where I'm like, okay, now I have a little bit more time to work on this project. And of course, seeking legal representation for myself and putting together the information that I'm going to need in order to, not just in the court of law, but fight my university as far as this investigative leave thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot of that. I think I got a headache the other day and I took a good long nap. The dogs and I have been at the park quite a bit, which is probably where they wish we were right now. But, it is what it is. Just doing what I already always do, just with more time to do it.
Well, that's great. And Amber, we'll definitely bring you back on if there's more developments and everything. And yeah, because it sounds like this is, I know that this isn't just a North Carolina university thing. This is, something. This is
so with everybody listening to this and so many people in the veterans community being, near or on campuses of higher education, that I think this is part of our greater responsibility as veterans to help demilitarize our communities. And, we can start with college campuses for the most part, because I think about, all the pressure that we get, especially me, somebody working in veteran services, they always want to promote defense jobs, defense companies, join law enforcement, recognize, kind of these big things that are very much about militarizing our communities. But when people are us, and we say, hey, our military experiences have actually told us that this is a bad thing to have in our communities. This is a bad way to respond to students asking for, safety and changes to make things better for them. Then they want to deny you once again that veteran status. You can only be a veteran if you believe these certain things. And so I think it's really important for veterans to find ways to speak up about militarization in our communities. And I would hope that more people are willing to do something like that in the future.
Yeah. There's definitely an overrepresentation of veterans who are right wing and support stuff like this, and that means the rest of us need to be more vocal. Just that's how it always is. Because and I mean we see that both with not only the the way that police are treating people, but also the way that our government treats veterans, which is another thing you work with. Just the just the shitty way that the government treats. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, I wanted to say something else, but I forgot. I have so many things to say.
If only you had a podcast.
If only, I think I'm going to have some time to get back to my podcast over the next few weeks. So,
yeah, definitely check out Amber's.
See how that goes.
Check out the episodes that Amber does have up for unauthorized absence. Check out the interviews that she has. She has been focusing a lot on basically anybody who's not a straight white male in the military, in the veteran community. So that's a great, because Lord knows there's enough of us straight white dudes talking. So hopefully Amber finds some time to really get and doing some more.
Other veteran podcasters this weekend.
Oh yeah, you met Joe, because he was out there doing a speech for his his book.
Met Joe, and then my friend Kate Dahlstrand too, who is also on Twitter often.
Right on. Well, please be sure to follow Amber at Tooterbell, TOOTERBELLE on Twitter. We'll have that down in the show notes as well. Amber, as always, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about all the cool stuff you do.
Getting arrested on a Wednesday evening when I just wanted to go home and eat.
Hey, it's you're doing more than I'm doing. I'm just yelling into a microphone.
Everyone has their role.
All right, Amber, thanks so much.
All right, bye-bye.
So for the bonus episode this week, I got Brian Quinby from Street Fight Radio to come on to the show to talk about the Netflix original movie Triple Frontier, in which we watch what's his name, Charlie Hunnam have a terrible accent, Ben Affleck be overweight and bored and kind of sleepy and have huge divorced dad energy throughout the entire thing, and then the guy who played Poe Dameron just be swarthy and everything. It's a fantastic movie about 5 operators who were high-speed Delta Force, completely fucking up for an entire movie and then yelling at each other a bunch until, in the end, they're very lucky to be alive. We also talk about what would be the coolest gun to hold. Brian is going to go find out if that's going to be an Uzi, as he is traveling to Vegas soon to go shoot an Uzi. So very excited to hear a report back from Brian on shooting an Uzi in the desert and how he feels about that. You can listen to that on Patreon, patreon.com/hellofaWayToDie. We have lots of bonus content. We always have audio and video stuff coming out every week. So if you're just not getting enough with our main stuff, please feel free to kick in. We have stuff that comes at the $1, the $3, and the $5 level for that, as well as all kinds of other things that we're doing. So we have a zine that's going to be coming out pretty soon. If you want to contribute to that, feel free to contact us, Sergeant Joker at hellofawaytodie.com, or you can DM me. I'm at Army Strang. You can DM Nate at In These Deserts. We have lots of ways to get in contact with us. The zine is going to be, this first one is going to be revolving around why you signed on the dotted line. So that's $10 and up level. You'll get 2 hard copies of that, and then you'll get some other little trinkets that we've put together, a little care package for everybody. So look forward to that. If you don't want to get the zine, any amount that you guys can kick at us in the Patreon is really helpful. And even if you can't kick in to the Patreon, we're excited to always have you here and listening to us and spreading the word of at least somewhat left-leaning politics in the military, and that not everybody is a insane right-winger in the Army. Most of them maybe, but not everybody. So whether that's just kind of sharing the podcast, or if you go to our YouTube and subscribe to us there, I do a live every Thursday. I do a live, and then every that goes out to everybody. But we also upload the free podcast episodes to YouTube, usually a little bit earlier than we release it everywhere else. So if YouTube is where you want to go, where you'd rather listen to your podcast, we have that there for you. But yeah, it's always great if you can leave us reviews and subscribe to our stuff, subscribe to the Facebook, to the Twitter, and everything. Kind of boost our numbers up. Whatever you can do really helps out. So because we really enjoy doing this, really like being able to be a voice for left-leaning veterans, whether that's just Democrat left all the way out to the hardcore socialists. We like to be able to be the people that say it's not just crazy right-wingers. So whatever you can do, whatever you're doing, we appreciate it, and we thank you for being here, and we will talk to you next week. Zoom, zoom.